Hi, good morning, everyone. This is Joseph Rosales, and this is my co-host, Ike Devji. Hello, Ike.
Good morning.
And welcome to Business in the New Normal, where we discuss relevant and objective information that helps business owners, professionals, and leaders to not just survive, but thrive in what we call the new normal. And today we have a really great guest who's going to share information with us about bankruptcy and some of the more creative and appropriate uses for bankruptcy. And we know that most people see bankruptcy as a negative thing, but it's a real business tool that can be used to help people move in a different direction in their business sometimes. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started here in a minute, and I'm going to turn it over to my partner, Ike, and he can do an introduction and get started from there.
Excellent. Well, thank you for joining us again, everybody. It's a pleasure to have our guest today, his attorney, Pernell McGuire. Pernell is the managing attorney and a partner at the law firm of Davis Miles McGuire Gardner, which is an Arizona headquartered law firm with offices in multiple states that handles a wide range of business issues. Pernell brings a great depth of experience to our discussion this morning. He is not only a certified bankruptcy specialist of the firm's bankruptcy team, but he has nearly 3 decades of experience in bankruptcy law specifically, which is more years than many attorneys have even been in practice. So Pernell, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing some time and some of your background and knowledge with us.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Thank you. Can you share a little bit about your background and how you got into this area of law specifically? And we lawyers these days are as specialized as doctors. How'd you pick this?
Yeah. So I tell most people that the reason that I'm a lawyer is because I really didn't know how to do anything else. I'm not good with my hands and didn't want to, work in construction or in other industries because I just didn't have the skills to do that. But so that's what sort of got me interested in becoming a lawyer. I know I could help people. And then in terms of the bankruptcy field, my undergraduate degree is in accounting. And I've always enjoyed business. I've always enjoyed seeing how businesses run and operate. My dad was a small business owner, so I got to see him struggle, quite frankly, and succeed and all of the things that sort of went into running a business as I was growing up. And so I've always been very interested in business itself. And so when I got out of law school and joined a law firm, I gravitated towards a business firm. And the firm that I went to practiced bankruptcy law specifically. They were a big bankruptcy firm. They did massive bankruptcies. This is back when I got out of law school in the early 90s, dating myself a little bit, but we did Greyhound's bankruptcy. We did Zales Jewelers bankruptcy, Macy's, super mega large bankruptcy cases and got to see how those worked and were put together. And then later on, when I switched firms, started representing smaller and mid-sized companies. And so I've sort of seen the whole gambit of ways that bankruptcy can help business.
Great.
Well, it's interesting because between the two of you, we have a lot of legal expertise on this call today. Ike is a asset protection attorney specializing in helping businesses and high net individuals to protect their wealth. And he's based out of Scottsdale. I work with my clients on helping to optimize their businesses and the people. So Pernell, in business, there's so many different components here before bankruptcy. What are some of the things that you and your law firm can help businesses with and people with before that last resort of bankruptcy?
Yeah. So as you mentioned, bankruptcy is a very effective tool that can be used and should be used if necessary, but it is something that we like to look to as our last best option. Before we get to that point, we'll sit down with clients and get as educated as we can about their business and about their needs and actually sit down and try and give them some counsel about how they can improve their operations. Depending on what the issue is, there's a number of things that clients can do to improve. And so we'll give some general business advice. In addition to that, we often negotiate with key creditors. A lot of times it's one or two major creditors that are causing a lot of the problem or grief for a client. And so we'll reach out to them and explain to them the entire situation, that this client is worth a lot more alive than dead, quite frankly, to them. If you put them out of business, you're not going to get paid at all. And so we'll negotiate an out of court or out of bankruptcy restructuring with those creditors. So we can do that as well.
Interesting.
Now, there are different kinds of bankruptcy, and I know that the public isn't very familiar with those. Could you give us a 10,000-foot view of the different chapters of bankruptcy and which one really would apply to business that might be struggling right now?
So yeah, there are basically two types of bankruptcy when you boil it down. There's a liquidation and there's reorganization. So liquidation is basically you're throwing in the towel, you are going to cease operations, and you're not going to continue to operate. So we call that Chapter 7 bankruptcy. It can be used for both businesses and individuals. And basically you list out all of your assets, you list out all of your debts. A third-party bankruptcy trustee is appointed to liquidate all of the property, if there is any, and he or she will take that money and whatever's there available, will pay it to the creditors, and that's it. The reorganization chapters that apply to businesses can be either a Chapter 11 bankruptcy case, Chapter 12 bankruptcy for farmers, or a Chapter 13 for individuals who want to reorganize. And the reorganization process, a lot of people think about bankruptcy being the end of the road, and it's absolutely not. I mean, Chapter 11 allows businesses to continue operating almost business as usual. There's some modifications that have to be made, but you retain all of your assets, you retain your employees, you retain everything that you need in order. In that operating process, your creditors are then prevented from taking any action to try and collect from you. So all lawsuits stop, all the calls stop. You're given a breathing spell of anywhere from 3 to 4 months, sometimes as much as 6 months to a year of a breathing spell, where your creditors really have to stand down and take a back seat. That allows you to then reorganize and restructure your operations and then put together a plan to pay those creditors back. So when we're talking about businesses, the most effective chapter that we use really is Chapter 11. And most recently, Congress modified the Bankruptcy Code to adopt a new chapter for small businesses called the Small Business Reorganization Act. And that's the chapter that we're finding most effective right now to help businesses that have less than $7.5 million of debt restructure and reorganize and stay in business.
Wow. Yeah, there's a few more layers than most people believe there is, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So when should a business owner consult with someone like you?
In my experience, we find that the biggest mistake that business owners will make is that they wait too long to reach out and get some help. Really, it's understandable. Folks feel like they've failed, or they're a little embarrassed that they can't pay their bills, or that they're struggling at all with their business, and so they'll wait and they'll take extreme measures to try and fix the problem without really having an understanding of what all of their available options are. And so even if you're not on the edge or on the brink of filing bankruptcy, it's still good to get in with an attorney and examine what all of your options are, because you very well may not file a bankruptcy. It may be just a matter of negotiating a temporary, we call it forbearance, with a creditor, having them stand down for a little while or restructure the obligation. And sometimes having the horsepower of an attorney behind you will help you get that done. But we need clients to come in and visit with us soon. The biggest thing I think that you have to look at is your cash flow. Cash is king in any business. And when you're getting stretched and you're sending all of your dollars out the door so that you don't have the money you need to make money, that's a real red flag that should signal to you, hey, I need to talk to somebody about whether I'm on the right road. if you're taking personal assets, for example, we see a lot of small to mid-sized business owners taking money out of their 401k plans and borrowing money heavily on credit cards to fund payroll and fund their business. Major red flag there. That's probably a time when you want to sit down and talk to an attorney as well. If you're unable to service what I call your secured debts, you have equipment loans or business loans that are secured by your property, and you're unable to make those payments, again, that's a time when you want to come in and talk.
Outstanding information you're providing to our listeners here. And it's interesting because to continue on with this point, there's so much that people could and should be doing before they pull the trigger on a bankruptcy. And those are things that you help people with, that objective perspective that you have. You've done this hundreds and hundreds and maybe thousands of times before, and you know what it's like to be in that seat. Most people have never been in that seat before. They've never had that challenge that millions of businesses are going through today. They don't know how they're going to manage. They're putting their house on the line. They're putting their 401k on the line. They're doing everything to try and do the right thing, but they're not availing themselves to a resource that might be a better path for them. So thank you for sharing that. People sometimes wait too late. They can do any of these meetings on Zoom, or are these things they come in and see you in person, or how does that work?
Yeah, so we can do it over Zoom. That's just you mentioned the new normal. That is certainly a tool that we use, as well as the rest of the business world. And it's no problem. We do lots of these bankruptcy cases over Zoom, and we can get to know the clients that way. And we ask for a lot of detailed documentation from them. Of course, that can all be sent in electronically, and we can review it and then meet with them. So yeah, most all of it right now is being done virtually. In fact, most of the hearings in the bankruptcy court are done virtually as well. So everything's being done virtually.
Welcome to business in the new normal.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Now, Pernell, you had mentioned some great red flags, like being unable to service key debt for some of your vendors, or secured debt for your equipment loans that are essential to the operation. And I believe you said that Chapter 11 was the one that you most commonly used was the form of bankruptcy you most commonly use to help a struggling business owner reorganize and move forward. So can you walk us through some more of the I know that you said that one thing that was very encouraging was you said that, hey, there can be a period of 6 months to a year where creditors need to pause and give the business some opportunity. What are some of the other benefits or protections that are built into that Chapter 11 filing for the business? So for instance, do they continue to make payroll? Does it affect their tax obligations? Can you walk us through some of the operational details? If I am running a retail store or a restaurant or any of the other businesses that have been really impacted, and maybe you can tell us which are the businesses that you are having to do the most rescue work on as part of that.
Sure. So I think the simplest way to look at how bankruptcy impacts and affects operations is to think of a line drawn in the sand, and that line being the date that you actually file your bankruptcy case with the court. So what we try and do, and what the bankruptcy code allows, is that all of the debt that you've incurred prior to that date, prior to that line in the sand, we sort of put on hold, and we don't pay that back. From that date forward, you need to pay your bills. So there are some limitations there. As you go forward, you need to pay your employees, you need to pay your taxes, you need to pay your operating expenses. But what you don't need to do is keep sending money out the door after your old debt. So that frees up cash, and that's an enormous protection, or a help, assistance, whatever you want to call it, to companies who are trying to reorganize, because most of them generally are cash strapped. For mid-size and larger businesses too, we can then go out and try and get some new financing. If you have some assets that are not already encumbered, that don't already have liens on them, we'll reach out to banks and try and get some additional cash. We call that debtor in possession funding, DIP financing, which then gives you some additional cash to help you reorganize. And those creditors enjoy a super priority, we call it, position in the bankruptcy case. I know I'm getting a little technical now, but the point is they're protected and very well protected. So they have an incentive to make that loan. So there's a greater likelihood we're going to be able to get some money into the case to help with operations and help you get restructured. So that's an advantage as well. If you're being sued, the litigation stops. That's a huge advantage because now you're not paying lawyers to go out and defend you. We know how expensive that is when you get involved in litigation. So the litigation stops. In addition to that, most of the time that litigation is then brought into the bankruptcy case. It's removed back to the bankruptcy court. So it puts it in one venue, which makes it more affordable to deal with, quite frankly. So everything is designed to help the person or the company that's filing bankruptcy to be able to afford being in business still and to eliminate all of the additional expenses that are out there so that it can reorganize, again, with the long-term intent of making sure creditors get repaid. This is not just about the business. We want creditors to get paid back. We just don't want the company to go out of business because we know if it goes out of business, it's very likely creditors are going to get practically nothing.
Interesting.
Excellent. That's exactly the tale that I think we need to share. So thank you.
Yeah. I want to honor everybody's time, and we want to try and finish up in a few minutes here. But it's really interesting to me because one of the things that I see as a business consultant, performance coach, is that something got this business into this state in the first place. And often it could be a single incidence of loss or tragedy, somebody die. I mean, there could be all kinds of reasons why these things why business starts to slide. Often, though, it's because the business wasn't run strong enough in the first place to isolate themselves. They hadn't built up enough. And so that's something that I really would be interested in knowing more about how you guys help those businesses. And maybe it's something we can even help you with offline and talk about that, because that's what we do. We take businesses and help them perform at their higher level. And that's where they start to generate more revenues and start to become healthier and stronger, and then can move through this bankruptcy or whatever other protections that they have. Are there some things that you can share with us? And it would be really great, a story. If you have a story that you could share with us about a client, and no name, obviously, that you moved from where they were to where they are now solvent and strong again.
Yeah, no problem. In fact, I'm happy to share a success story. And then there are many out there, but I'm going to share one with you. It's actually the very first Chapter 11 bankruptcy case I did for a small business. And the business has since been sold, so I don't mind telling you who it was. It was a company called the Bounty Hunter in Telluride, Colorado. And they specialized in making high-end leather clothing for very wealthy people, quite frankly. And he had a very great operation, but he got behind paying his sales taxes. And the Colorado Department of Revenue came in and seized all of his stores. He had a store in Telluride, a store in Vail, Colorado, and a store in Scottsdale. And the Department of Revenue in Colorado at least seized both of his stores and all of his inventory and all of his bank accounts. And so he couldn't even afford to pay a retainer to his lawyer to do anything. I mean, he was just completely stuck. And so he came to us, and we went ahead and filed a Chapter 11 case for him, and helped him through again all of the tools that are available in a bankruptcy case like that, to reorganize. And we negotiated a good deal with the state of Colorado. We got his bank accounts unfrozen, and he had to restructure and make some changes in how he was operating, and had to restructure how he was handling his employees. But he was able to do that and successfully reorganized. And we put together a plan of reorganization for him. He paid his creditors off over a longer period of time, and continued to operate the business, and sold the business and made a good sum of money when he sold his business about 15 years later. And the company is still in business today. So now it's under new ownership, a new company, and they're still operating. So
great story.
Great.
Yeah.
So, Pernell, that was all really great information. And you've detailed with us. Are there times where you need to file both business and personal bankruptcy? For instance, I know that many of our business owners have personally guaranteed debt to obtain startup financing, or maybe they have an SBA loan. I know that's a whole different animal to itself. Can you walk us through some of those challenges? And are there cases where you have to do both?
Yeah, that's a fairly common scenario we deal with, where we have individuals who have guaranteed debt for the business. In the first analysis, we try and keep individuals out of bankruptcy, if at all possible. That helps preserve their credit. It's less disruptive. And so we can file just for the business, and then we'll go in and we'll ask the bankruptcy judge in the business case to grant what's called an injunction, which is a court order preventing that creditor from suing the individual. And the basis for that is we say, Judge, hey, that individual is very important to the operation of this business bankruptcy. And if you're suing that individual, it's going to make it less likely that we're able to reorganize. So Judge, please stay this creditor from suing this individual until at least we get this business reorganized. And so we'll go in and then get the business reorganized. Now that injunction or that stay will only last until the plan is approved. And so we hope by that point in time, we've got a good plan in place to pay that creditor back so that they won't continue to pursue the individual. If they continue to pursue the individual, we might have to take the individual into bankruptcy at that point. But it's been my experience that that's been a very, very successful strategy to keep the individual business owner out of bankruptcy while we're reorganizing the business. But if that fails, we can certainly file a bankruptcy for the individual as well. And a lot of times what we'll do, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Right. Will they still be able to move forward with their 11 if they have the personal bankruptcy as well, if one doesn't affect the other adversely?
It doesn't affect it necessarily adversely. It does affect it, but you can move forward with the Chapter 11 business case, even though you are personally in bankruptcy, but you have to file either under Chapter 11 or Chapter 13 for the individual. If you file Chapter 7, then a bankruptcy trustee is appointed, and he basically then comes in and takes over your ownership in the business case, and that just doesn't work. So if you're filing individually, it would be a reorganization type filing.
Okay, so that tells me, and that tells our listeners, that if you are a business owner who has a business that's currently struggling due to our current economic conditions and the virus, and that is personally jeopardizing your personal solvency as well, that this needs to be a coordinated conversation, and these things shouldn't be done separately by separate people without looking at both.
That's absolutely correct, and they do bleed over to each other, so there has to be a coordinated effort. Sometimes, depending on the complexity of the case, we have to get separate counsel for the individual and the business, but most often we're able to do them together. And I was going to mention that a lot of times what we'll do is we'll file an individual case and a business case, and then ask the bankruptcy courts to consolidate or join those cases together. So again, we just have one case that's less expensive for the client and less complex, and makes it a little bit easier to go forward and get a plan approved. So there's a lot of different options that we do there, a lot of different options available.
Well, that makes a lot of sense, both in terms of time and expense, as you said.
Yep.
Well, it's an interesting topic, and it's one that unfortunately we're seeing asked a lot more today with as we're moving through this economic downturn and people losing businesses and closing businesses and being challenged. And so I want to thank you for coming on and sharing this information today. At the end of this presentation, your information will come up, your contact information that you provided to us. And we encourage anybody who's listening, if you're considering some sort of protection, whether it's bankruptcy or something else, you really should reach out and get expert counsel. Pernell is expert in that. You're local, you're in Arizona. And we feel strongly about supporting Arizona businesses, first of all, but don't struggle alone. There's an image that I have in my head of a business owner on a deserted island all by themselves, and they're waiting for something to happen. Well, guess what? Something not good's going to happen. So reach out to Pernell. His contact information again is going to be on a slide. Reach out to Ike if you're one of those people that has a strong net worth and you're looking at how do I protect it, what kind of planning should I be doing. Don't be reactive, be proactive. Reach out to Ike. His contact information is there as well. As you know me from all my other things that I do, I own the company for 35 years that helps people optimize the performance of their business by optimizing the performance of their people and their processes. So, together we got a lot of resources for you here, but most importantly, we want you to be able to thrive, not just survive in this challenging environment that we're in. And yes, there's a vaccine coming. Who knows what that means to everybody and what it's going to do to affect business. We know this, that you are in charge of you. And in my most recent book, The Leader of You, we talk about you are the leader of you, and you need to step up and be that leader that you can be, so you can be even more effective leader of others. So with that, I want to again thank our guest. And Pernell, you have any parting words for our listeners today?
Just a couple, which is, we aren't sure what's going to happen in the future. The Congress, they're trying to put together another stimulus package. They're not being very successful. But be aware, do your homework, keep track of what's going on out there. There might be additional PPP funds, payroll protection funds that are going to be available to business owners. But you got to be aware, and you got to look after that stuff. And if not, then, take advantage of the resources that are out there that you just mentioned. I totally agree with that.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you again. And Ike, any parting words from you?
No, I think it was great that we were able to have Pernell on to share some of this information and show us how to use this in a positive way. So thank you again, Pernell.
Thanks, Ike. Thanks, Joseph. Appreciate it.
And everyone, again, this is Joseph Rosales. I'm a co-host, Ike Devji. And thank you for tuning in today, and tune in next week for another great and informative episode on Business in the New Normal. Take care. Bye-bye.